Welcome to 805 Sports Talk, and Week 7 of the high school football season is fast approaching, and we're kind of in a blur of the high school football season, but we're going to do our best to kind of break down what we saw in Week 6 and what we are expecting to see in Week 7. I'll be at St. Joseph High School Friday night as the Knights try to stay red hot against a Pioneer Valley team that is coming off a tough loss against Pioneer Valley. We saw Pioneer Valley Friday night. Lorenzo, you and I, they struggled. It was kind of interesting to see Coach Ruiz at Pioneer Valley not use his offensive starters for a large portion of that game. What are you expecting to see St. Joseph do against Pioneer Valley Friday night?
I'm nervous for Pioneer Valley because, I mean, if Lompoc can put on 49 points and then call off the Dogs in the second quarter, Lord knows what St. Joseph's offense is capable of. I mean, we've seen this team already put up 70 and 77 this season, and I mean the receivers that St. Joseph has, I mean, to me it's one of the more unguardable units next to maybe Lompoc and St. Ynez, but you know, I don't think Pioneer Valley defensively has enough to withstand the likes of Nate Guzman, Joe Miller, Mason Bealey, all those guys, even Jaden Vargas as well. So you know, I'm hoping it's a close game, but I'm leaning towards that it's going to get ugly real quick.
Would you be more surprised if St. Joseph doesn't score 70 points again, or if they do score 70 points again?
I'll probably be more surprised if they actually reach 70 points, because that means 3 times this year
yeah,
that they've done that. I don't think any team's done that before in this area.
Okay, and you mentioned that receiving core at St. Joseph, but Dino Maldonado has been playing great throughout the season. I think he's at 22-5 touchdown to interception ratio. Do you think that has a lot to do with the receiving core? Has Maldonado been that good?
No, I mean, obviously when you have 5-6 receivers, I mean, it makes the quarterback look good. But Jim Chavala has told constantly at the roundtable that Dino's really improved from a leadership standpoint. He's really taken charge of this offense, of this team, and that after every practice, he usually gets together with his receivers and they put in some extra reps in. So I could definitely see that paying off. I could definitely see how Dino's like starting to emerge as one of the more emotional leaders of that offense.
All right, and Elliot, you know, you've seen these squads this year. Pioneer Valley's struggling out of late, losing to Atascadero and then struggling against Lompoc. We weren't sure what was going on with the reserves playing the bulk of that game. Do you think the Panthers are going to provide any resistance for St. Joseph, or will it be another big win for the Knights?
I think both, actually. Okay. I think the Panthers will put up a good fight. It's a city rivalry, sort of, valley rivalry, because actually St. Joe's not in the city. But I think they've just got too many offensive weapons, because you talk about his receivers, but he's got some good running backs, too. They don't just go out and throw it, so they set up the throw with a good running attack. So I see them scoring a lot of points, but Cabrillo, I think, has a good enough defense to keep it a little closer, not 70 or 77. I do see the 49 somewhere in that area, 6-7 touchdowns before they call off the Dogs, but I think Coach Ruiz has got his hands full with this team. And his own kids are a little bit down right now, and I'm not sure what that was all about last week either, unless he just figured it was a lost cause and didn't want anybody to get hurt and save them for the rest of the year, because figuring, like many people, you can't beat Lompoc at this level, at this time of year. It's the only people that are going to be able to beat them might be in the playoffs. So why risk getting your starters hurt? May as well just take the loss, get some kids some playing time, and regroup for the next week. So I see them putting up a good fight, but I don't see that they've got the talent to overcome that offense. Remember too, you talk about kids like Mason Bealey. He's also a terror on defense. They're not all one-dimensional. They play both ways, and they've got some good defensive backs. It's going to be tough to throw on them. It'll be tough to run on them, but I see St. Joe putting up like a 49-14 or something like that.
All right, and I'll be there live Friday night for our Santa Maria Times Game of the Week pregame show. Starts at 6:45 p.m. with kickoff at 7 p.m. We haven't seen the Knights on TV in a little while, so it'll be good to see them in person and see that offense, how it's been rolling the last couple of weeks. We'll get to see that in person, so be sure to tune in to SantaMariaTimes.com Friday night. And the team we saw last week, Lompoc, is off this week. They're pretty much coasting into their bye week at 7-0. We saw I guess the big thing from Lompoc's perspective Friday night was that they actually trailed in that game after the Toa fumble early on. The very next play, Matthew Garcia hits Kenneth Huberry for a 40-yard touchdown play. Anything surprise you from Lompoc Friday night, Lorenzo, with the way they bounced back after being down 7-0? Pretty much just took care of business against Pioneer Valley. What did you take away from their first 7 games and Friday night's performance?
I was more surprised about that fumble. I rarely see that from Toa, especially that early, but it's a credit to Lompoc for not only responding right away, but putting on 49 and then calling off the dogs right there. So, as far as, can they get better? I think even Andrew Jones believes that this team can get better. There's still some issues with penalties and trying to clean that up early on. There's also developing the reserves, from the moment they pull Toa, the moment they pull Shamar, even Johnny Manzo, who's really put together a very spectacular season on the special teams end. So Lompoc is where they need to be. I think they're being at the record that they are, the lack of significant injuries. Lompoc is where it needs to be, especially heading into their next game on October 20th. And we got Fox coming into our neighborhood as well.
Yep, October 20th, the Braves host San Ynez. That game has been picked up by Fox Sports West to be on their Prep Zone webcast, so tune into that. October 20th, Elliot, the Braves are in their bye. How do you think they're feeling right now? Anything they need to focus on at this point?
Well, Andrew Jones is never happy. The Tawa fumble gives him something to complain about, that you've got to protect the football. But he doesn't get too down on the kids. He just reminds them that, like you mentioned, the penalties, they can eliminate the penalties. Though many of those are just dumb penalties, and if they don't take those penalties, then they are in control earlier. And that's one of the things that he doesn't want to have is he didn't mind that they were down because he knew they'd come back. I'm sure he has that much confidence, but why have that obstacle to overcome? So cut out the penalties, hold on to the football, keep your head in the game. But I think they're right where Andrew Jones wants them. And like I said just a couple minutes ago, they've got some of their toughest games still to come at the end of their Los Padres League season. That's what it's all building towards, so that they can go 10-0 into the playoffs. I'll be interested to see how they play when they come back from their bye, but they'll have a week off late in the season. Everybody should be healthy, and they'll be raring to go. After a week off, they're going to want to hit somebody on defense, and I would not want to be the guy facing them coming out of that bye week.
They got 2 weeks to prepare for San Ynez, so already that tells you who has the edge right now.
Yeah, and San Ynez plays Cabrillo in the first LPL game for the Pirates this year. Their Pirates are coming off a 54-0 win at Morro Bay, and the records just keep falling at San Ynez. Dustin Gregg, I think twice this year he set single-game touchdown records. He had 6 TDs against Templeton and then 7 TD passes against Morro Bay last week. He also has the season touchdown record with 24 touchdown passes, just 2 interceptions this year. Gabe Prendergast set 2 career marks Friday night, touchdown receptions in a game with 4, and career receiving marks. He's over 2,000 yards. Lorenzo, you were really high on San Ynez. Now they get to kind of the meat of their schedule. Cabrillo probably won't be too much of a tough matchup, but then Lompoc next week. How are the Pirates feeling at this point?
I think they like where they are right now, but I mentioned about 2 weeks ago that this is where we really figure out who San Ynez really is. Cabrillo obviously won't be that big of a hurdle, but then you got Lompoc, then you got St. Joseph, and those are the 2 teams that tripped them up last year and prevented them from being in the playoffs. So I'm going to be curious to see how San Ynez responds this time around to one of those teams. I think a victory against either or can get them in the playoffs, but 2 losses, it's going to be hard for them to actually sneak in. So.
Yep, San Ynez hasn't been challenged this year. They do play Cabrillo. You've seen Cabrillo play. That defense has been leaky all season. What do you think San Ynez's focus will be on taking against Cabrillo? Kind of cruise into that Lompoc game, or really try to fine-tune some things against the Conchs?
I think they've got to be careful they aren't looking down the road to St. Joseph and Lompoc. Those are 3 high-powered offenses. Those are going to be battles when those 3 tangle at the end of the season. So if they don't get ahead of themselves, this is going to be another blowout. I'm sorry, Lompoc, A.J. Pateras is getting the kids in the right direction, but he's told me several times that they're at least a year away, probably 2, 1 year away from being like a 5-5 team, and then 2 years away from 7-3, 8-2. So he wants to keep them going in that right direction. So his big challenge here is to see if they can put some points on the board and hold the score down so that it's not a 70-0 or a 77-14. So I think they're up for that challenge, but I don't see that they have what it takes to beat San Ynez. They got some good players, but of course they had a quarterback change, and it seems to have actually been for the better. But Jackson Anderson doesn't quite have the experience. When you look at the experience that San Ynez has, when they graduate their kids, they're going to have to rebuild, but that's not this week, and it's not the rest of this year. So Cabrillo's got his hands full, but I can see them at least putting up a battle. I don't think it's going to be a way blowout, but I don't see them being able to pull this one off.
Jackson Anderson alone really makes things competitive for Cabrillo. I've seen the offense just change so much with him at quarterback.
Yeah, from Sean Wood, who was a nice quarterback, but Anderson has provided a spark, and I think that bodes well for the future. Unfortunately, the future doesn't begin this week.
And looking at a team who's kind of surprising this year is Righetti, another Pac-5 League game. I think that's a huge Pac-5 League game this week. That's the big one, taking on Atascadero at home. I think a Righetti win there would be huge and kind of really even open up the Pac-5 League race even more after Paso Robles kind of stunned AG last week. Do you think the Warriors have a chance against the Greyhounds at home?
I think so. I mean, it's homecoming week. Atascadero, we never really know, we can't really get a gauge on who Atascadero really is. And as Paso Robles proved on last Friday, I mean, I guess we're still trying to figure out who Aurora Grande really is. And, I mean, credit to Paso Robles keeping their season alive, but, credit to Righetti and Ed Herman. I mean, keeping his guys focused, even though there was a little bit of rust from what Herman said from that San Luis Obispo game coming off the bye, but, the fact that it's a home game, it's homecoming, Atascadero has been very up and down. I see the advantage going Righetti's way.
Yeah, you saw the Warriors Friday night. It's 27-7 win at SLO. Not too much to get excited about, I guess. A win's a win, especially in league. What do you think about the Warriors Friday, and what are the chances against Atascadero?
Penalties did them in. It could have been a huge blowout. And remember, the 7 that SLO got was at the end of the game against the backups. So the starters pitched a shutout, and it could have been much worse. But they had one stretch of that game where they had it was something like 6 out of 7 penalties, 6 out of 7 plays had penalties. In the third quarter, false start. Then they ran a play, then more false start. And now Ed Herman told me that the defense of San Luis Obispo was calling out go, and things like that, and getting his offensive linemen to jump offside. So they've got to get their head in the game and not let them be suckered into false start penalties. So that seems to be something that they can clear up. And I agree with Lorenzo that Atascadero has been, they're one of these teams, that whole league in a way has been hard to figure out this year. They're up, they're down, but Righetti's home. They're on a roll right now, a little mini roll. And I think they'll take, everybody's beating San Luis Obispo except Morro Bay. So they're just a team that's ripe for the picking. So I think Righetti's going to use that momentum and surprise Atascadero, which traditionally has been a better program. They're kind of mediocre this year, and that's a bit unfathomable, but these things happen. Maybe they were hit harder by graduation than we thought. But Righetti's got a prime chance to win this game, and then they actually have a shot at making the playoffs. So Ed Herman's got these kids believing right now. They've shown a lot of offensive talent. They run well. They pass well. Giddings has done a really nice job. Brandon Giddings, the quarterback. So I'm thinking Righetti might have a chance to win this one at home.
Yeah, they've had some big wins this year, but I think this is their biggest game of the season. Some nice wins, but this is probably, the turning point for the season. If they really are serious about turning that program around and making the postseason this year, they got to, take care of business against Atascadero. Friday night at home, it should be a fun night. It is homecoming, so everyone's kind of looking forward to that one. I think that's a big Pac-5 League game for the Warriors. Moving over to the Northern League, Saints took a week off. They really needed that one. They've been banged up throughout the season, and they really get to start Northern League play against Templeton, a team that has struggled lately. They got blown out by Napomo to start Northern League play. So Santa Maria, another big game for them. Can the Saints, Lorenzo, start off a Northern League play with a win at Templeton? What are their chances?
To me, this is like a pick'em game because, I mean, when Templeton's offense gets going, I mean, it is very deadly. And unfortunately, in this case of the Saints defense, I mean, they've been undersized and they have been guilty of allowing one too many points. But, you know, luckily for the Saints, I mean, they're not going against a team with a lot of size. But, I mean, you know, the injuries, I mean, I don't know how much of a toll it really had. So, I mean, this team has to get healthy like right now just to make any kind of push for the Northern League title. And I mean, this Templeton team, I mean, I can't really get a gauge either. I mean, the Northern League is just like the Pac-5. It's pretty wide open.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's at Templeton, which is a kind of a wonky field. You know, Santa Maria plays here, and they play at Pioneer Valley and Righetti's fields and San Ynez's fields. Those are all pristine turf fields. But you went to Cabrillo, you know that they have a field, but they don't play on it because it's no lights and it's a crummy field. It's fine for practicing. Templeton's is a whole lot like that. It reminds me of that, except with lights and built into that hillside. And that could give them a distinct advantage. But Santa Maria, it's like a toss-up. Like you say, I think either side could win it. It probably depends on who wants it more, and I think Dan Ellington can get his kids up to want it more. You know, it's one of those that could come down to the last play, the last couple of series of that game, but I'm liking Santa Maria to kind of redirect their season right now that they're in league play and come out with a win. They should be a playoff contender with Napomo. But you know, they're going to have to play the game, and Templeton does stand a chance. You just don't know which Templeton team is going to show up, the one that can score 70 points or the one that can't score at all. We're hoping that it's the one that can't score at all. But the problem for Santa Maria is they're not that big, and they get tired late. So it could come down to who has the fresher troops at the end of that game. But I'm thinking Santa Maria's got a slight edge.
Yeah, Santa Maria quarterback Blake Truitt has carried the team pretty much offensively all season. This could be that point where he really puts them on his back and you know, might carry them to the playoffs or perhaps a Northern League championship.
Well, they've lost Isaiah Garcia through the middle of the baseball season at least, and but they got kids like Bobby Ruiz that can pick up the workload. There's some good talent there.
John Ramos as well.
John Ramos, yeah, kids like that. And he's got some good wide receivers, and Truitt can throw. They prefer running, but he can throw when he has to. So they could mix it up a little bit and put together a consistent offense. And remember, Truitt himself is the leading rusher on that team. So if he can draw the defense to him and pitch it to one of his tailbacks, then they can pop for 7-8 yards, so they can just keep moving the ball down the field. So I'm looking for Santa Maria to use all of their weapons because they're going to need them.
Yeah, and we'll wrap things up with a little bit of 8-man football this week. We have 2 8-man teams ranked. VCA ranked in the Division II poll, and of course Orchid Academy number 2 in the Division I poll. How do you think the Spartans are feeling about themselves right now? You know, obviously the 8-man season is a little bit shorter, so they only have 9 regular season games, but they're on pace to maybe win a Mount Pinos League championship. VCA is also in the Coast Valley League championship race. How do you feel about the state of 8-man football in the area, Lorenzo?
Orchid Academy's on fire. I mean, the victory over Cade, the blowout on Friday, and then earlier this season, the victory over Mojave, and then Darren Miller already in the school record books. I mean, it's just so much momentum at Orchid Academy. I mean, this is, to me, obviously, they're the best 8-man team in this area, but I have a feeling that you could be looking at the best 8-man team in the state of California right now.
They got it all working. They really have a powerful offense, a strong defense. But remember, it's 8-man, and it's, as the coaches have said over and over again, if you can get past that defensive line, you could be gone. And we saw a couple weeks ago a 72-68. So you can see high scores. I can see Orchid Academy putting up 72 if they need it. Or calling off the dog somewhere in the 40s. But I don't see anybody stopping them until the playoffs, and I think that there's a good shot that they're going to make it into the championship game. I've said it before. But Darren Miller is good. We were talking about, is he the best 8-man player ever in the Valley? Well, I don't know. He's the best that Orchid Academy has had, but remember, their program is fairly young. It's only about 8 or so years old. But he's their best ever, and they've had a lot of talented kids in the first few years of that program. But 8-man football goes way back around here, and Valley Christian is led by Pete Fortier, and he was a record-setting running back for Valley Christian 30 years ago. And there have been a lot of good players, but he is right up there with the best that we've seen play in 8-man. He could play on an 11-man team. He easily could. His family chose to have him go to that small school. He's been going there forever. Those kids tend to start there in preschool and go right through high school. Pete Fortier himself did that, and then he went away to college and came back and was the athletic director and coach forever, left for 1 year and came back again. So there's a lot of loyalty toward that school. You talk to the parents of these kids, and they went there. So it's not as though he went to Orchid Academy, rather, or the VCA kids don't go there just to avoid playing 11-man football. But Orchid Academy is just as strong a team as we've seen. And we've seen a lot of good ones, and not just up here, but the schools like Kate and Thatcher, Villanova Prep, they've put together pretty good teams over the years, but beating Kate was a huge statement, and I see nothing but wins until they get deep into the playoffs, and then they'll be tested. But that's one of the things too. You go back to Lompoc, some of these teams, they roll up a lot of points, but you can't just score 28 points, go up 28-0 at the end of the first quarter and put the subs in. Because you go 10-0 in the regular season, you've got to go into the playoffs, and you may get an easy game the first week where 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, and Lompoc, or Orchid Academy in this case, will be up in those high numbers. But once you get past that first round, the competition gets a whole lot better. And if your guys aren't used to playing a full football game, full 48 minutes out there, they're going to be exhausted and they're going to be run over in the third and fourth quarters. And yes, it's important to get the backups experience, which they do, but you need your starters to be able to play a full game if it's needed. So they got to keep them in. They can't just pull them when it becomes a lopsided score. They tend to take their foot off the gas in the second half, and you see a lot of kids getting experience, which is good for the future. But they need to get those kids experience so that they're not exhausted when they come up against the Newberry Parks down the road or the Mojaves in a rematch in the playoffs. So I see the coach's standpoint there that you got to play them to make them game ready for the long run, because it's this, first you do the preseason to get yourself ready for league. Then you want to run through the league so you can be all set for the playoffs, but then the playoffs is really crunch time, and you need those guys to be able to play a full 4 quarters.
Yeah. All right, congratulations to Darren Miller. 100 career touchdowns accounted for in Orchid Academy's win last week. They got another big game against Thatcher this week. That's all we got, but remember, Friday night we'll be at St. Joseph High School for the Santa Maria Times Game of the Week. The Knights host the Panthers in LPL action. Thank you guys once again for tuning into 805 Sports Talk.